there's, won't surprise you to know, a lot going on in social care at the moment. And not all of that is particularly good news for social care. We've got quite a lot of stuff that I will forward on to you by way of a newsletter or an update. I'll also put it on the website. As I say, there's quite a lot of stuff, some of it coming out through the Care Providers Association, some of it we're getting through the Care Association Alliance, and some of it will apply to some of you, some of it will not apply to some of you, in the sense that it's either for care homes or for DCAs, etc. But please do look at it. And there are a couple of things that I would bring to your attention before we really get started into today's meeting. We've posted something about changes to holiday leave, which is causing questions. Unfortunately, many providers don't get that right, and that makes a lot of difficulties. So please make sure that you are getting it right or take advice. We've also put some information around about waste management for care homes. That's quite a costly area, and is something that you can be worthwhile actually looking at saving some money on. And with dom care providers, some local authorities are now asking dom care providers to look at waste management because of, if you like, non-clinical waste, etc. So take a view with your local authority, and the information is there, and Enter will be very happy to talk to you. And the last, but sadly the most serious item, we've been approached by providers who are struggling financially. Now, this is to do with areas such as the employer's national insurance contribution going up, low fees, and general costs rising, salaries, etc. If you are struggling financially, please get advice up front. Don't wait till it's too late. We can point you in the direction of people, but you may well need to look seriously at something like an insolvency practitioner, or getting some very good advice, particularly if you've got monies supported against your own domestic property, etc. So please don't leave it too late. Dudley.
Me, of course. Thank you very much for joining for today's meeting. It's an interesting one today because we've got various people here. Let me just try and get my full screen there. Otherwise, you won't. And thank you very much for joining today. As you can see, it's about making today sure your staff have the right data and right information about and data about your staff. We've got some great speakers as well, and you can see here the DBS, Reed Screening, and Dominic Headley as well. And we will endeavour to give you as much information as possible. Please take on board some of these elements, because it's not just about CQC, but it's beyond that as well. So there's legislation and legal requirements that will be needed from you across the board. There's lots that taking place within social care. And we are trying our best to make sure that we are keeping you up to date. As you'll see in the box, we'll leave you information, if not the newsletter, the website of Lcas, but also we have a WhatsApp group, and we'll share the information on there, and with the WhatsApp group. And with the WhatsApp group, if you see here, you can scan the code and the number that's there. But please, if you are going to be part of the WhatsApp group, can you please put in, for example, your name, your organization and area, and it helps because it would be good to know, because we're trying to place people in different areas, so we don't want to mix you up. So for example, if you happen to be in work across the board, then you can have all the areas that you work in. If you're in South East, Southwest, Northwest, or North Central, or East London, even outside, let us know. So give us your name, your company name, and also as well whereabouts you are, your location as well. And you can join the WhatsApp group that way. Just on a final note before we start the ball rolling, the National Care Show is going to be taking place in London at the Excel on both the 30th and the 1st of May. We will be having a managers meeting that will be taking place there on the 1st of May. And I'll leave information in the chat where you can join, and you can be part of an actual Lcas live session there. If you go on there on the care show london.co.uk, you'll be able to register. Please join us, and we'll have an array of speakers on the day. And it's about a live session. You get to see us in person. You get to intermingle with various other providers as well, so which is really important as well. So it'll be good to see you, and also for you to share your information as well. We're looking at things around Unison, or the leader of Unison will be there in regards to sharing what will happen with potential unions for social care. We've got elements around technology and AI, and from Rishi from Care Vision, Rishi Jawahar from Care Vision, but also he's also a provider, and Anna Knight, who's the chief of the Dorset Care Association, who's talking about things such as providers unite and speaking up as well. So there are an array of things that are there. So it would be nice to see you in person. I'll put a link in the chat to join and register. Apart from that, please enjoy the session today. There's lots of information that will be had, and please make the most of it. Use the chat box if you want to ask any questions at all during the day. And also as well, you can connect with the speakers as well. They will share their information accordingly. Outside of that, have a great session, and Peter, I'll leave you to it to start the ball rolling.
Okay, thank you very much. You may actually wonder why we're sort of concerned with things like DBS and fake references. Part of it has come from, or perhaps I should say the drive for this has come from CQC, because they're finding that when they look at the career path of people, that when they're doing inspections, on the rare occasions they actually do inspections nowadays, that they're finding large gaps and they're finding fault. And there have been a number of incidences with fake references, and not just fake references, but also fake qualifications, when it's been proven that people haven't been able to do the tasks that they say they've got the qualifications for. But Corinne will go into that in good detail. And it's about protecting yourself. And also we are seeing that people are coming back from, say, doing work as on direct payments or personal assistance, where they're being paid on a cash basis. So they are not able to provide references. So they're providing fake ones. So that's the sort of background to this. Anyway, I don't think Kiran is here as yet from DBS. So on the basis that she isn't, I will ask Corinne Peart from Reed if she will present for us. Please welcome Corinne.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am delighted to be here. So, Peter, are you sharing the slides for me?
I will share those slides for you indeed.
Thank you so much.
I'll just pull them up.
Thank you. So while we're doing that, my name is Corinne Peart. I am the Head of Strategic Engagement at the Better Hiring Institute, or BHI, which is much easier, where we're on a mission to make UK hiring faster, fairer and safer, and work with key organisations and government to action it, essentially. I also have a role with Reed Screening, which is the only screening business that's open 24/7, fully based in the UK, family owned, and we work 1 day a week for charity as well. So across those two organisations, we work with approximately 15,000 businesses across the UK, gaining insights across sectors, and we have strategic partnerships with UK government. That includes running and creating the Modernising Employment All-Party Parliamentary Group. We call that MODE PPG for short. There's so many acronyms, so I apologise in advance for that. But that is essentially a group who explore various hiring topics to drive actionable change at industry level. So our outputs, if we just move on, Peter, please. Our outputs either fall as change at government level or best practice guidance, which is released free as part of our national hiring framework, which is a UK first. Now, our work with government continues to support the need for positive change in hiring. And an example of that is we worked with Home Office on halting the revert back to face-to-face right to work checks following the pandemic. We've held lots of parliamentary sessions on a range of topics. Most recent couple pieces of guidance have been future of management for our future of work. We launched that with CIPD and the CMI. We've also done skills. We do all sorts of different topics, and I'm happy to share links for anyone who might be interested in attending any future sessions. But if we just move on now, I'll cover what I've been asked to cover today on hiring fraud. So as Peter has mentioned, hiring fraud's one of the biggest trends that I would advise you to be really be aware of in your day-to-day hiring practices. Recruitment fraud alone costs £23.9 billion a year. So we worked with UK government, including the Prime Minister and his anti-fraud champion. They wanted to take action, so that we worked with them alongside CIFAS, MPs, and Sue Smith, who some of you may know. Dominic, I know you do, because we've done quite a bit of work together in the past. And we really wanted to launch this UK's first guide on tackling hiring fraud. The guidance has got lots of helpful tips and recommendations for organisations to help spot and deter hiring fraud. And as Peter has mentioned, I'll happily share the link to the guide. It continues. Fraud is such a massive risk for organisations, and it's actually at epidemic levels in the UK. It's more and more organised and sophisticated. So today I wanted to pull out a few key risks for you guys to be aware of within your organisations. So I'll start, as Peter's mentioned, with qualification fraud. There's loads of stories in the news. You may or may not have seen them, but recently a report found that a nurse had lied not only about her qualifications, but also about her experience. And that's only one example. So qualification fraud is really gaining pace. It's not a huge rise, but the frequency and volume of cases we see is 100% trending upwards. And at Reed Screening, we've verified over 500,000 qualifications over the past 5 years. So it's becoming such a problem that we're seeing more and more in day-to-day practices when we're doing checks on people. The true scale of qualification fraud, secondary documentation fraud, and identity fraud in the UK is actually unknown. The reason for that really is lots of sectors not being in sort of like recruitment screening databases, but there has been a rise of about 0.2% of cases to 0.6% over the last 2 years. Just to bring that to life a little bit, if the figure hits 1%, that would be 1 in every 100 job candidates. And given the number of individuals hired per year nationwide, obviously that would be catastrophic. So the spike in fraudulent practices is most likely down to general advancements of digital editing tools, which we've seen more and more of over the past decade. So that has led to more and more illegal online institutions issuing fake qualifications. That causes problems for individuals and companies alike that are fooled into thinking essentially that qualifications are legitimate. And then secondly, digital tools have enabled individuals to easily buy or create fake qualifications. We actually created a full persona for less than £500, which would give me a fake qualification. I am Dr. Corinne Peart, if my qualifications were to be believed. I'm definitely not a doctor, just to clarify. But for under 500 quid, we had the full range. So for an organisation, you have to really be on the ball in terms of looking out for fraud. So it's so easy to just buy or create a fake qualification nowadays. And organisations and people are susceptible to falling for fake qualifications. One of the big reasons is increasingly sophisticated AI tools, essentially. So over the past month and a bit, we've seen loads of documents, like multiple documents that have been digitally edited by individuals. So to the untrained eye, the documents look perfectly normal, but all of them had characteristics that don't adhere to a set format a document should come in. So these changes could be amending a degree result from a 2-1 to a first, or changing the name of the certificate holder. It's a little example, something to be aware of. Adobe have now got an AI assistant built in. So a candidate can get Adobe AI assistant to edit documentation to show an increased amount of income, or amend a bank statement, for example. So just something for you guys to mull over there, but the most common deceptive practices is to entirely fabricate a qualification, and that could be vocational or a higher education certificate. So another little example here, there was actually a convicted fraudster with a fake CV who lied about his qualifications, and that actually helped him to secure a senior NHS role. He was recently ordered to pay back nearly 100 grand after a ruling by the Supreme Court. So he used fake details about his academic and employment history when applying to the NHS. They lied about having degrees from various universities. He also inflated and gave false information on his work experience too. So he claimed to have held senior positions and said he was once seconded to the Home Office, interestingly. So yeah, at Reed Screening, we do see that certain sectors are more susceptible to fraud than others. Notably, you guys, unfortunately, in the care sector, though over the last few years, there's been a big spike in financial services and technology sectors too. A few key things that you can look out for on qualification that might indicate fraud. So that could be an incorrect or false awarding organisation name, spelling errors or poor grammar, incorrect qualification title, poor quality of the document. It all seems really simple, but when you're in the thick of it, trying to get someone into a role, it can be really, really difficult to take the time, take a step back and really think, is this a valid, legitimate document? But the risk that is posed to your organisation if you don't take the time is huge. So that's a little bit about qualification fraud. So there are also things that you should be aware of, like reference houses, the manipulation of AI, which I've covered a little bit about, dual employment, immigration fraud. The list goes on, and I could talk to you all day about it, but I'm sure Dominic would like to also cover his section today. So I won't go into everything, but just a few key points here. The misuse and manipulation of AI is getting bigger and bigger. So we hear weekly about applicants who are using AI to generate applications, case studies, cover documentation for roles. We've even seen examples of this in social work settings, then the person who's applied for the role isn't qualified, up to scratch, or they don't even have relevant experience. So you can mitigate the use of AI-generated responses by a couple of things: considering competency-based interviews, which obviously is very good practice for you guys. You can use methods which can't be manipulated, so conducting interviews face-to-face as opposed to remotely. Lots of key points in the guide that will be really, really helpful, just as key takeaways for you to be aware of. It's a really great guide, if I do say so myself. On reference houses, so we've seen the rise of reference houses. There is so much disparity between what people say on their CV and what the reality is. So we operate a fraud database, which has just breached 2,000 fraudulent organisations. These are reference houses or organisations who are ready to lie on behalf of a candidate who wants to get a job in your business, essentially. We use that through with all of our clients at Reed Screening to make sure that we're giving that extra level of protection. But we recently saw a job seeker who'd been turned down for roles due to references showing they'd been dismissed for theft from their previous employer. desperate to get a job. This person paid a reference house to provide a false reference and previous employment history. Now, the job seeker successfully obtained a job. They got work when their new employer contacted the reference house, who very happily verified their previous employment and supplied a fake reference. The use of the reference house was only identified in this instance following an investigation when the employee stole 80 grand from the employer. So things that you can consider when in receipt of references, obviously we, in your sector, it's really important to get good quality references. There's also a very good document, which is a Better Hiring Toolkit and Care, which really helps with that 360 approach for care organisations. But in very basic terms, make sure when you're looking at references that the referee's job title suggests a position of responsibility, that the email address looks official, there's no spelling errors or additional characters added into that email address. And a little stat for you, but as many as 1 in 4 CVs it contains falsehoods, misstatements, or an outright lie. So if you don't believe that hiring fraud in some capacity has touched your organisation, I would urge you to take a much, much closer look. I think you may unfortunately be surprised at what you would find. But keep an eye out for the following things on CVs and employment history, claims that can't be verified or checked, gaps in employment history, missing references, a general lack of detail, inflated job titles and responsibilities. But yeah, I think if we're more aware of the potential risks within our organisations, then we can only become more secure. So yeah, in short, we're seeing loads of changes to the way fraudsters are trying to get through the system and into employers to cause harm. We continue to work with UK government and industry on ways to improve this. Sorry, Peter, if you could just move on for me, that would be amazing. Thank you. I should have moved you on a little bit before then, but there we go. So yeah, we're seeing lots and lots of more sophisticated ways of working happening. And then, sorry, Peter, if you just move on one more, if we just move on to that slide, I wanted to call out a case study that's in the guide on fraud as a result of recruitment agency use. Now, this one in particular is about worker impersonation, where let's say Corinne has registered, been screened with a recruitment agency, and then I've sent somebody else to carry out work on my behalf. Obviously, with that, there are lots of risks, like safeguarding risks, reputational damage. The list really, really does go on. And then very quickly, if we just move on, I'm sure I'm getting towards the end of my speaker slot. Just on the final slide, I wanted to bring your attention to the actions that you can take within your organisation. I am happy if anyone would want to have a chat with me or wants to pick my brain, no problem at all. Happy to share my contact details. There's loads of information in the guide. I would really recommend that you have a look at it. And even just some small implementations of the recommendations will really help your organisation. I'm happy to take any questions that you guys might have. But for now, I'll hand back over to you, Peter. I think that's enough from me.
Well, thank you very much, Corinne. There's a huge amount for people to think about. And as I say, it comes up time and time again with CQC. And it's one of those things that's grown over the years and was probably ignored when it wasn't too great a problem. So before we move on, any questions for Corinne?
Corinne, I'd like to ask a question. I know I'm jumping the queue about Lcas. I think you're very right. I think the emergence of so many things with now chats, GPT and things that are put together, I think it's very likely that a lot of CVs are going to, let's just say, but it's about actually just making sure that providers and employers of understanding about the actual main facts they're dealing with, because I think everyone's going to say they probably stayed a bit longer in various places, and I think that's not going to change. But I think it's also about just making sure people understand about, if you are the most important thing, if we're going to be using people to care for individuals, it's to understand that they have the relevant qualifications for that, because you wouldn't want anyone to be placed in under responsibility if they don't have the right qualifications. And I think this is the key factor behind it all. If there's anything that makes sense, I think it's providers to understand that, I think, more so than anything.
Yeah, I agree.
But if anyone would like to ask any other questions, I've got one more question to ask, Corinne, but I'll leave it for people in the group if they want to actually, they do that. And I think Dominic may have something to say as well a bit later as well. It's just to do with, because there's so much information, what you've just spoke about how the best things to do. I guess it's, if you get it wrong, or what happens if the consequences of actually it being, or you know, criminal actions, or what happens as a result, I guess would be the other question for people to be aware about.
Yeah, and I think as well, it in all honesty, it does depend on the severity. So if it's somebody has totally lied, like I mentioned, the guy who got that role in the NHS, the guy who stole 80 grand from an employer, those are real risks that organizations face if they don't do the correct checks. You know, it's time, it's a waste of time. It's, you know, the risk of financial people stealing from organizations it's real. We see it so frequently. It's absolutely bonkers how often it happens. So I would say time and money, but then you've also got your reputational damage. But in the care sector, it's even more than that, because it's people, you're dealing with people, you're caring for people. So not only is it your organization, but there are individuals heavily involved in making sure that you get the right person in role for the type of work.
Yeah. Thanks. I think we've got two questions very quickly, Peter. We've got River of Care that has raised their hands. I think, is it Deborah who wants to speak from River of Care? And you want to ask a question, or we can ask it if it's in the group. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, a quick question I have is that, like, for example, we know how important referencing is, but companies are now, they don't want to take responsibility. So they put, they will say, from this date till this date, this person was working with us. But then when you send them a form to evaluate how that person was performing, and if there is a chance of that person going back to be re-employed, will they accept him? They don't like to answer that. So as a provider, if, like, for example, okay, we like the person and we want to employ, what advice do you have? This is one. And another question I have is that with the international recruits, they have qualifications. You've got nurses coming recruited. How do you check whether, okay, the nursing one is easy because you have NMC, but the rest, how do you check if it's genuine qualification or not?
Yes, so on the qualifications, internationally it can be a little bit more difficult. So at Reed Screening, we have the capacity to check them internationally, but for organizations, it can be very difficult. So my advice to you would be, whatever the origin of the certificate is, I would do some research into the awarding body within that country. I would see if you can speak to a person, because they should have a record of that qualification. But just be aware that, you know, I would do a really good amount of investigative work on that, because, you know, in the UK we've got organizations like Head that you can utilize as an organization. So you can check whether a certificate is valid through Head, or you can, you know, outsource to the likes of Reed Screening. But where it's an international certificate, I would say just do some investigative work, check the company, check the awarding body within that country. and you should be able to find whether it's valid or not through those means. And what was your first question, Deborah? Sorry.
How about like, companies who now, they don't want to give references. So normally my reference, when I send for work reference, there is evaluation. And then in that evaluation, one of the questions is that if this person comes back to you, will you re-employ him? Yes or no? So they don't want to complete the form, but then instead they will say this person been working with us from this time to this time, and for us, like, we will be like kind of like stuck because you are saying to this person, you'll be given a job based on your reference and all your waiting things to be once completed. So how, like, what will you do, like, in a situation like this when companies actually giving you from this date to this date, but it doesn't actually say anything about the person?
The conduct, yeah. So I've just seen that Dominic has just popped in the chat that he's going to be covering a bit on this a little bit later. I'm happy to come in, Deborah, if Dominic, I'm sure Dominic
that's fine.
it, but I'm happy to come back in at the end and answer any questions or have conversations. But we are just, for insight, we see often that it's dates only on references, and that there's no sharing of effective references and conduct information, or very little, which we try to encourage through the toolkit in care, which again I'm happy to share a link to.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks. I know we're running tight for time. There are a few questions in the chat, Corinne, if you don't mind maybe having a look at. There was one around AI, and is there sort of like something which counteracts all these wonderful AI tools? I know they're getting so smart and smarter in this day and age, so maybe some things that they can look at, and maybe a tool or something that can help them. And I think the other question was, can you give agency staff references, please? Some of them worked in your organization a few times. So, for example, can you give agency staff a reference if they've worked in your organization a few times? So I guess people are coming back, agency staff are going back to companies and say they worked there as agency staff. Would that satisfy those as a referee, basically?
It's really difficult because the agency should be the one who supplies the reference, but in the same breath, they're very unlikely to give any kind of effective reference or conduct information, because that will be held by wherever they've been working, essentially. So it should be the agency. However, you could do a personal reference from an organisation where you've worked. So you could ask that organisation, let's say I've done some work at Lcas. I could come to you, Dudley, and saying, you do me a personal reference. But it should be the agency, really.
Okay, thank you. We've got, one last question. Marzia had a hand raised, and I think we'll ask, and then we'll go to our original first speaker. But Marzia, you've got the last question, and anyone can use the chat box to put their questions in there. Corinne, while she's here, can still look at it, and so can the others. So Marzia, before we can move on.
Morning. Sorry, I joined the meeting late, so I missed the first bit of it. Regarding referencing, we've been told by our head office that you can't give a negative reference. That is the reason you don't do the positive reference as well. That is the whole reason why we put the date only, nothing else, that we call standard referencing. That is one thing I just wanted to double check. So is that okay? And the second thing regarding the certificate, is this the government policy that we have to cross-check the certificates, qualifications?
You don't, but I would suggest that you do, because the risk to your business if you don't check qualifications is huge. You could be employing anyone using a fake qualification. I don't know whether you were with us when I was mentioning it, but I essentially created a fake persona for myself for under £500 that said that I was a doctor. And I could have, tried to get into work within a GP practice, for example, using fake reference houses to give references to say that, yes, Corinne Peart is a doctor. So I think, and also just on your mention of the references, Marcia, Dominic is going to cover some information in his section. I'm obviously conscious of time, but I'm happy to come back in at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think we can move on now, and I'll leave it to you, Peter. Thank you. Thank you for that, Corinne. And also you can check, Corinne will leave her information in the chat box as well, and please use the chat box for any questions. Go ahead, Peter.
Sorry about that. We are recording the meeting, so you can have a recording, and the slides will be there, so you can have the slides as well. And then you can, we'll go through the chat afterwards, and if we haven't had the time to answer questions, we will endeavour to get you those answers, and we will share those later. I see that we have Kiran Rehal with us from DBS. Kiran, would you like to have the stage in that sense? Do you have a presentation? Do you need me to?
I do.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna
I will make you co-host so that you can share your slides.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that all. Can you
I can see
my
it's coming up.
slides? Okay,
Fine.
perfect. Great,
Yeah,
thank
great.
you. So I'm just gonna, I think this is all getting a bit complicated. Right, so good morning, everyone. So my name is Kiran Rehal, and I'm from the Disclosure and Barring Service, and I am the DBS Regional Outreach Advisor for Greater London. So essentially a point of contact for any questions and queries that anyone may have about DBS services. You are welcome to get in touch with me. I often talk to employers and our partners and stakeholders. It may be about questions about eligibility to a DBS check, but can also be about when a borrowing referral should be made as well. So yeah, so I'll make sure obviously these slides get circulated to you all today as well. So if anyone does have any following questions, please do feel free to get in touch. So I can tell from some of the conversation that's just been happening that I'm sure a lot of you on this call are well aware of who the DBS are and what it is that we do. But obviously when it comes to recruiting people to work with vulnerable groups, like children and vulnerable adults, it is important that those people who are recruited are suitable to work in that role from that safeguarding perspective. So we want to make sure that those vulnerable adults that we care for are going to be safe from harm when they're receiving a service. And that could be from a paid member of staff or from a volunteer. And that is why the DBS exists. So the purpose of the DBS is to protect the public by helping employers make those safer recruitment decisions, and by barring those individuals that pose a risk to work, vulnerable groups from working in certain roles. So the DBS aims to make sure that employers have all the necessary information available to help them make those suitability decisions about the people that they're looking to employ. And we do that through the issuing of those DBS certificates. And as well as that, we can also take those next steps to legally bar individuals when they do pose a risk. And this is all in the aim of supporting that DBS vision, which is about making recruitment safer. So how does the DBS help to safeguard those vulnerable groups? So I think the part of our service that we're mainly known for is those DBS checks. And I'm sure a lot of you are quite familiar with them as well. So obviously when someone is looking to recruit someone to work in a particular role, as an employer, they may carry out that DBS check that will disclose an individual's criminal history. And the employer can then use that information along with other safer recruitment processes, and they can make that suitability decision. So how suitable is that person for the role that I am considering them for? So that's what that DBS check is there to help with. So we have 4 different levels of checks. They disclose different types of information, and they have different eligibility requirements as well. So you have to be eligible in order to be able to apply for a particular level of check. So just very, very quickly, I'll just go through these different levels of checks. So we have the basic DBS check. This will disclose any unspent convictions and conditional cautions. There's no restrictions as to who can access a basic DBS check. So no eligibility criteria has to be met in order for someone to apply for a basic level DBS check. Anyone can apply for this level of check, and anyone can go on our government website and submit their own basic DBS check if that's what they needed to do. Moving on from that, we have the standard DBS check. Now this will disclose spent and unspent convictions and cautions subject to filtering. So for a standard DBS check, these are for particular roles that have been named in legislation as being eligible for a standard DBS check. Now, some examples of these roles include some roles in the legal sector, some roles in the financial sector, veterinary surgeons, football stewards, for example. They can access a standard DBS check because of the role they're doing. This means that they are eligible for that standard DBS check. But the check that probably a lot of you are probably more familiar with is that enhanced DBS check and that enhanced barred list check. Now, the enhanced DBS check will disclose information about spent and unspent convictions and cautions subject to filtering. The information the DBS receives about those convictions and cautions all comes from the police national computer. But the difference with the enhanced check is this is also where relevant police intelligence also plays a part as well. So if there's any information about an individual that a chief police officer feels is relevant to the role or the workforce that has been applied for, then they can include that information on that enhanced DBS check. Now, for example, so I'll come back to that actually. So obviously with the enhanced DBS check, in order to be eligible for that level of check, you are looking at roles that we say are in work with children or work with adults. So now we're starting to work with those vulnerable groups. So you see the benefit of having not only the information about those convictions and cautions, but also that police intelligence as well. Because that police intelligence could include information like, for example, if someone's had a number of allegations against them that might not have led to a conviction because maybe there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute them, that's the kind of information that could be included as police intelligence, and that can be disclosed on a DBS check so that that employer can use that information to make that suitability decision as well. So that's the enhanced DBS check. And then obviously our highest level of DBS check is that enhanced barred list check. Exact access to the barred list. So the DBS manages and maintains two barred lists. We have the adults barred list and the children's barred list. Some people may just be on one of those and some people may actually be on both. But in order to be eligible for that enhanced barred list check, you are looking at roles that are in regulated activity. So regulated activity is very specific activities, but regulated activity is work that someone who's on the barred list is not allowed to work in. So it is a criminal offence for someone who's on the barred list to work or offer to work or look to work in regulated activity with the workforce that they have been barred from. So that is why it is our highest level of DBS check, because if you were looking to recruit someone to work in regulated activity, you would want to make sure that they are not on the barred list. So that's why, it is really important that employers are aware of what roles are in regulated activity so that they can make sure that they are carrying out that right level of DBS check. So those are our different levels of DBS checks. And as you can see, there are costs there associated with each level of check as well. These costs are for paid staff roles. But if you do work with volunteers, the standard, the enhanced and enhanced with barred list check are free for volunteers. But if a volunteer required a basic DBS check, there would be a charge there. So those are our different levels of DBS checks. And as you can see, the information on there is there to be used and looked at by the employer to help them make that suitability decision. So one thing obviously people are often curious about as well is what happens when you have recruited someone from overseas and you're keen to carry out a criminal records check for them as well. So the DBS cannot access criminal records held overseas, but obviously it is possible to submit an application while the individual is overseas. But essentially a DBS check will only ever cover the time that someone has spent in the UK. So if someone has spent their whole life in the UK, that's what the DBS check will cover. If they've only spent 2 weeks, then again, that is what the DBS check will cover. So that's why if you did need to request a criminal records check for someone who has spent some time overseas, as an employer, you would either have to go through the relevant embassy basically in order to go through their processes in trying to access that criminal records check. Not all countries outside of the UK will have a system like the DBS. Some countries may only provide, for example, a certificate of good conduct or good character. It will vary, but unfortunately it's something that the DBS cannot advise on. And obviously the onus is on the employer to obviously go contact the relevant embassy and then go through the appropriate routes. There is a link on this slide to a Home Office guidance, and that's got an A to Z of all the embassies, and the countries and their embassies, so that you can contact them directly and find out what the process is. And in terms of when to apply for these overseas checks as well, it will be for yourselves as an organisation to make that decision. The DBS cannot say when checks should be carried out for overseas applicants, but obviously it's an organisational decision, and often it will be guided by a sector-specific and regulatory advice. So we would recommend that you go and seek further guidance there as to when or if you need to carry out those criminal record checks for overseas applicants. So another way that the DBS can also support organisations and employers with their safeguarding measures is the update service as well. So one thing we used to be asked quite a lot in terms of information that's been disclosed was if an individual received a conviction or police information became available after a certificate had been issued, how as an organisation would they know about that information? So that is what the update service is there to provide. So the update service is free for volunteers, and for paid positions, it costs £16 a year. And an applicant is then able to register their DBS certificate online. And once they've registered their certificate online, that will allow for regular checks to be carried out on the certificate to make sure that the information on there is still valid and still up to date since the date the certificate was issued. So it helps a lot of organisations to support their safeguarding measures because it allows the employer to check online free of charge, and as long as they have the individual's consent, they can check to see that the DBS certificate that someone is showing them is still valid and still up to date. So obviously for a lot of organisations that might carry out DBS renewals or rechecks, rather than carrying out that whole brand new DBS application every time that period has arrived, if someone is on the update service, then it'll be a matter of typing in the relevant information on the login screen, and you'll be given a status update of that DBS certificate. So yeah, that is the update service. So I actually do have a slide here about regulated activity with adults as well. So obviously, regulated activity with adults is different to regulated activities with children, and regulated activity with adults is very, very specific. And if someone is in regulated activity with adults, this is when they would be eligible for that enhanced DBS with the adults barred list check. So providing any of these activities once would mean that someone is in regulated activity with adults. I won't go into this in too much detail, but essentially providing healthcare by or under the direction or supervision of a regulated healthcare professional. You've also got providing personal care, so that's help with the washing, dressing, eating, drinking and toileting, oral care and care of skin, hair and nails. Social work with adults is also regulated activity. So if it's being provided to a client or a potential client by a social care worker. The assistance with the day-to-day financial running of an adult's own household. So this specifically means managing an adult's cash, paying their bills or carrying out their shopping. We've also got the assistance with the conduct of an adult's affairs. So this includes those who begin power of attorney or deputies appointed under mental health orders. And then finally, we've got conveying an adult as well. So conveying means transporting an adult, and it could be, it's not specific to a vehicle, so it could mean transporting someone around in a wheelchair, for example, but it has to be for health, personal or social care reasons due to their age, illness or disability. So carrying out any of these activities once would mean that someone is in regulated activity with adults and eligible for that enhanced DBS with the adults barred list check. And just to bear in mind that the day-to-day managers of those who are in regulated activity with adults, they would also be in regulated activity too, and also eligible for that enhanced DBS with the adults barred list check. So obviously, so as I said, with regulated activity, you can apply for that highest level of check, which is that enhanced DBS with the adults barred list check. So anyone who is on the adults barred list, it is a criminal offence for them to work in these roles, basically, or carry out these activities. Because if someone is in regulated activity with adults, you have to make sure that those individuals have not been placed on the barred list. So anyone on the adults barred list will not be able to carry out any of these activities. So that's why it is really important that employers are aware of what role, when they do employ individuals to work in regulated activity with adults, so that they can make sure that they comply with their responsibilities in terms of what we're going to now look at is that quick duty to refer. So there is a legal obligation for some organisations to make a referral to the DBS. So obviously, when someone has caused harm to someone, to a member of a vulnerable group, or they pose a risk of harm to vulnerable adults or children, then it is really important that, you know, the DBS do consider those individuals and consider whether they should be placed on the barred list or not. So there are two types of organisations that have a legal duty to make a referral. So those who are regulated activity providers, so any employers or voluntary organisations who will recruit individuals to carry out regulated activity on behalf of their organisation, they would be considered as regulated activity providers. And the other group of organisations are personnel suppliers, so employment agencies or businesses or educational institutions that will make an arrangement with an individual to then supply that person to another employer to carry out regulated activity. So, for example, like I've heard already in the call, a lot of you may have interactions with agencies who might provide bank staff, for example. They would be considered personnel suppliers. So the legal duty for these organisations to refer an individual to the DBS exists when certain conditions have been met. So I'm just going to cover that next. The duty to refer applies even when a report has been made to another body, like the local authority safeguarding team, and the duty to refer applies irrespective of whether another body has made a referral to the DBS in relation to the same person. So when should a referral be made? So obviously, when does that duty to refer exist? So there are two conditions that have to exist in order for that duty to refer to be met. So the first condition is that the individual has been removed from regulated activity. So that could be through a dismissal, they've been redeployed, retired, made redundant, or they resigned. And that's following a belief that that they've either engaged in relevant conduct, satisfied the harm test, or received a caution or a conviction for a relevant offence. So what do we mean by relevant conduct? We mean conduct that endangers or is likely to endanger, or conduct if repeated against or in relation to a child or adult would endanger them or be likely to endanger them. It's not only that the person may have harmed, their actions may have indirectly caused harm, or they could have put somebody at risk of harm, or they could have attempted and failed, or they could have incited. So relevant conduct is an action or an inaction that either led to harm or could have led to harm. When we talk about satisfying the harm test, by this we mean behaviour where there's no evidence of relevant conduct, so no harm has been caused, but there is sufficient and compelling evidence of risk of harm to a vulnerable group. So maybe the way someone conducts themselves, or the jokes they say, or the way they talk, for example, leads others to believe that this person may cause harm to a vulnerable group as well. So that's condition 2. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have removed someone from regulated activity, and that's following a belief that they have caused harm or they could cause harm in the future, or they received a caution or conviction for a relevant offence, that is when the duty to refer exists, and that is when a referral should be made to the DBS. And by making the referral doesn't mean that you've placed that individual on the barred list. That's not your role to do, that's for the DBS to do. So the DBS will then consider the referral and any evidence that comes along with it, and then we will make that decision as to whether that person poses enough of a risk to warrant them being placed on the barred list or not. And obviously we will only ever do it if it is the appropriate and proportionate thing to do. But certainly it is really important that employers are aware of their duty to refer and those instances when they need to make that referral as well. And I know sometimes people, if the police are involved in a situation, sometimes employers might think, okay, well, I told the police and the police will take it from there, or, I told the police and the police decide to take no further action. So what can the DBS do? The DBS has a different threshold to the police. So for the DBS, we go with the balance of probability threshold, whereas the police have obviously beyond reasonable doubt threshold. So their threshold is higher than ours. So there's not to say that just because the police decide to take no further action, doesn't mean that the DBS still wouldn't bar that same individual. So if these two conditions have been met, then as an employer, it is important that you do make the referral to the DBS. And even if these conditions haven't been met, but you still have significant concerns about the individual and the risk that they pose to vulnerable groups, then you can still make a referral to the DBS. We would just say you should do so in consideration of any other relevant employment or data protection laws, but you can still certainly make that referral to the DBS. And I just wanted to give a very quick example. Oh gosh, I don't know why it's come out really funny. I'm really sorry about that. So just a very quick example here that highlights obviously the importance of making a referral. So we've got Paula, who's a support worker for a local organisation that supports the elderly in their own homes. Paula's role includes some light housekeeping duties such as cleaning, but also includes shopping for elderly service users who can't do this for themselves. So obviously carrying out someone's shopping is regulated activity, and it only has to be carried out once in order to be regulated activity as well. So it's likely that obviously Paula in this case obviously is in regulated activity and would have carried out an enhanced DBS with the adults barred list check. Now, a support worker covering for Paula while she was on annual leave noticed an older shopping receipt and items of shopping bought that they knew the service user would not have requested, like steak and bacon, and the service user was a vegetarian. But when this was investigated further, it was found that when doing the service user's shopping, Paula was also adding items for herself, and this was being paid out of the service user's money. Paula was then dismissed because that was gross misconduct, but obviously because she was in regulated activity, so she was obviously dismissed, so that was the first condition met, and that was following a belief that she had caused harm, and obviously this is financial abuse here. Those both conditions had been met, so that referral was also made. It is really important that obviously organisations are aware of their responsibilities and understanding when that duty to refer exists and when they should be making that referral to the DBS. So in order to obviously how to make the referral, we do have our borrowing referral service, and this is our online form that you can complete. It guides you through lots of different questions, and so yeah, it's very, very, it's our new service, and it's been quite effective so far. But yeah, it's obviously takes you through the form, and then once you've included all your information, uploaded any of your documents that you want to send to us as well as evidence, you can submit that directly to the DBS. And obviously we've got a slide here as well that just kind of lets you know of all the information that you'll need to hand before you make that referral as well. And that actually brings me to the end. So obviously I'm going to share some of these slides with you. You'll have some useful links as well as my contact details as well, and a very short evaluation form. But thank you very much for listening. I hope that was helpful. I'll stop sharing, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for that. It was a very comprehensive Kiran, it's Dudley from Lcas. I know there are a few questions, some in the chat, and if anyone wants to raise a hand, they can do. I've got one there, so let me just get through the ones in the chat first. So first and foremost, by Amanda, if we refer, why do we get to know the outcome? I guess is the first.
Yep, no, it's a great question, and one that often people have. So as the referring party, you do not get informed of what the outcome is, and that's because obviously for that first condition for that duty to refer exists is that the person has been removed from regulated activity. So obviously if they're no longer being employed by yourselves, then there's obviously no need for you to know that information. But also it's the individual's right to privacy as well. So for a lot of people, especially if they've worked in care, for example, or in regulated activity all their lives, it's obviously quite a big decision that's been made for them. So it is their right to privacy. So the referring party will not be informed of what that barring decision is. However, if the referring party has a legitimate interest, then they can request that. So it'll be a case of emailing the DBS and basically explaining why they feel they have legitimate interest. So say, for example, you're aware that someone has been referred, but you're also aware that at the weekends they might volunteer at a knit and natter group, for example. So, you have, or actually probably that's probably not regulated activity, but maybe they volunteer somewhere else in regulated activity. So you have a legitimate interest in knowing whether they were placed on the barred list or not. Or maybe or they've been moved to another area of the business while the decision is being made. So if you have a legitimate interest in knowing, then you can request that information from the DBS. Okay.
Other question, is there a time limit to refer as well?
No, so there's no time limit to refer. We do sometimes receive historical referrals as well on historical cases. So but the main thing is making that referral.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question, I think, once again from River of Care. Deborah, I think that you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, a quick question I have is that, like, for example, if somebody have a caution or a charge on the DBS, you cannot refuse to give them job. It's based on whatever crime that they had. Yeah. So is there any list that we can check what is acceptable and what is not?
So that would be specific to your organization and the sector that you work in. So it may be helpful to have a recruitment of ex-offenders policy in place that details like what convictions that someone receives would make them unsuitable for that role. So it all depends on what obviously the sector that you work in as well and what is appropriate. So it may be that CQC might have some guidance on that, but it will vary. But certainly as long as you're transparent and you've got a recruitment of ex-offenders policy, for example, that kind of, makes it quite clear what convictions or cautions would make someone unsuitable, then obviously then you've got that as your as backup in that way. So, to defend your decisions as to why someone may not be suitable for a role.
I'll pick up that point in the next segment as well.
Okay, brilliant.
I mean, there's also a few questions that are in here. When you've opened up the floodgates of being referred, people have said, if a care worker is dismissed for being unreliable, i.e. calling sick, would this be referable? What if someone doesn't pass their probation? So I guess, what are the thresholds for people being referred? Because I think people will refer people for literally anything now. So what
Yeah. So so the two conditions is they've been removed from regulated activity, but the second condition is that there's a belief that, or there's a feeling, or there's proof, or that relevant conduct has happened. So relevant conduct is an action or an inaction that either led to harm or could have led to harm. And by satisfying the harm test, there's a concern that this person may pose a risk of harm to vulnerable groups. So yeah, reasons for like misconduct and things like that, that would not meet the duty to refer. It's where you remove someone because you have those safeguarding concerns that this person has either caused harm or could cause harm to vulnerable groups. That is when that duty to refer exists. And obviously they have to be in regulated activity as well. So for that duty to refer to exist, they've been removed from regulated activity as well. So yeah, but if anyone has any further questions on kind of those kind of scenarios, then obviously I will be sharing my slides. So you're always welcome to get in touch with me as well if you have any questions about that. So that's no problem at all.
There was another question that sort of follows on from there. So how long does the process take from submitting information to DBS to start the investigation? Because obviously some of the individuals may be applying to other services during the interim. So I guess that would be the concern for the referee.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, unfortunately, how long is a piece of string when it comes to the timings? Until a person has been placed on the barred list, they can still obviously work in regulated activity. But obviously, I'm sure there's going to be lots of discussions here about all those kind of pre-employment checks that can still be carried out and where information can be shared if someone did pose a risk and a referral has been made. But obviously, as much information as people can provide to us when that referral is being made, that obviously helps with a quicker decision being made as to whether that person should be barred or not. But yeah, so it does vary.
Yeah. There's a few questions seem to be coming up, but I think we have another speaker in Dominic. I'm not sure if there are any other pressing questions. You can please use the chat box, and Kiran, you can by means go into the chat box and then please leave your information and details there. The slides will be being shared as well, but please use that. But thank you very much for joining.
No, that's absolutely fine. Happy for you to get in touch with me, and I'll have a look. Thank you.
Peter, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else on there.
No, I'm just going to say thank you. That's very useful. There's a huge amount of info there, and I think we might well come back at the end after Dominic, because he's going to pick some these items up anyway. So, and as Corinne said, we could probably be here all day with some of the points that are coming through, and it's good to see those. But put them in the chat, and we'll put some more information together. We'll circulate it because it's clearly an issue that needs further addressing. Can I just ask? That's disappeared. There was a legacy hand which I think has disappeared. I think the screen is yours, Dominic.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Dudley. And thanks to Corinne and Kiran for your previous sessions. I will pick up some of the points that were in the chat box during mine, and obviously both will be around to answer further questions afterwards. I'm glad to join you all today for this very important meeting. My name's Dominic Headley. I'm director of Dominic Headley and Associates, which is a specialist consultancy practice that works with employers across many sectors on safe and fair recruitment. So not just making safe and fair recruitment decisions, but also dealing with safeguarding related conduct concerns. So a big part of my work is to provide advice and guidance to organizations such as you. And I work very, very closely with the social care sector for very many years. In addition to that, I deliver training for employers on safer recruitment and safer employment, and also have developed guidance both in partnership with the DBS, and thank you, Kiran, for raising some of your points, but also with the Better Hiring Institute and Reed Screening. So two of the guides that I have been involved in developing, where DBS have been involved to some extent, and Better Hiring Institute, I think Peter's already shared a link to one, the Better Hiring Institute Toolkit for Care, also known as Sharing Effective References and Conduct Information, and the other one, Safe and Fair Recruitment, a practical guide to carrying out pre-employment checks in social care. There's a lot of templates, a lot of resources, some of which I'll point out today, but they're all available. We'll make them available to you in your hands at the end of this session. And many of the questions that you've asked we can address. A big part of my work is around safeguarding, but also inclusion. And you might feel that these are conflicting areas. To me, in my day job, they're not conflicts at all. It's about informed decision making. Okay, so you may have someone who does not have any information on their criminal record certificate, DBS certificate, even if it's enhanced and barred. That is not a badge of safety. Okay, but to take up the point that was just made prior to my session, someone having a caution or conviction in itself is not an automatic barrier to that person working in a regulated post. So there's very, very many people across the safeguarding community who have had previous convictions. And unless someone is barred from engaging in regulated activity, as Kiran outlined, it is completely down to you as an employer to carry out a risk assessment to determine the suitability of that individual. Okay, so I work with CQC on this area as well. They don't have a list, okay? It's down to you as the employer to make an informed decision and carry out a risk assessment. We do have templates on that we will share with you at the end, but it's about you determining in line with CQC's guidelines whether that person is a fit and proper person. And that person, whether they're permanently employed, whether they're a volunteer, whether they're an agency person, agency worker, it is our duty to ensure that all staff employed are a fit and proper person, that they have the qualifications, skills and experience, as Corinne outlined, and are also by well of any health adjustments capable of doing that role. So we are asking, or you are being asked, for quite a lot of data as social care employers to be gathering, and it's a lot that is being asked for. Lots of great guides to help you do this effectively, but within the CQC guidelines under Regulation 19, there are 8 areas. I've listed 7 because points 2 and 3 are combined. They relate to criminal record checks. We are required to gather this information as part of our decision making and have it available for an inspection should one arise. Lots of information in there, but by far and away, when I went on a journey with DBS and Corinne a few years ago to support social care employers in this area, we found that the 2 areas that were most relied upon when making that safeguarding decision were the reference and the DBS. So I just want to talk briefly about these two areas in a limited vein, and obviously we'll answer any questions. And I feel that a human case study is an important one to outline. So this is based on a true story. So imagine we're the care home. We're going on that journey. This is a fictional care home called Altis Care, where this is our applicant, and her name is Layla. And Layla is applying to work in regulated activity, enhanced and barred list check adults. Okay, so she fulfills the right level of check, the highest level of check, but Layla has got a criminal record. Okay, if I was to present this to you as employers, you might go, well, I've got great concern about this, person having had 4 convictions over, the last one over 15 years ago now, but it's still 4 convictions, violence, drugs and theft. Can I employ her? Okay. Maybe you might take a policy decision to say that you wouldn't. But what if there was nothing on the criminal record? Does that mean that our applicant is safe? Okay, because we fulfilled our compliance piece. Well, what do we know about these individuals? Okay, we have on here Ian Huntley. We have in here Vanessa George, nursery nurse. We have in here Jimmy Saville. We have in here Lucy Letby. They all operated in positions of trust. None of them had criminal records. They would have all had a clear DBS certificate, which is clearly not a badge of safety in these cases. And they all abused in positions of trust. Okay, so a clear DBS in itself is not a badge of safety. Very many people who have abused in positions of trust do not have a criminal record, or their DBS certificate would come back clear. Okay, now these stats provided to me by DBS not so long ago say that 97% of the 5-odd million checks carried out each year at a higher level contain no information relating to cautions or convictions, no information relating to police intelligence, and no information relating to whether or not that person was barred. And as Kiran mentioned, DBS certificates do not show overseas criminal records. Okay, so when we are considering overseas applicants, it's not only important to do a check if you can from the country of origin or where they've been spending time, but it's also important to get a self-declaration from the applicant in line with England and Wales requirements. It's not just about getting a check, it's also about their duty to tell the truth. All of this is included in our guides. Okay, I'm throwing a lot of information at you already, but I'm providing solutions to you at the end as well. So don't mind that I'm throwing you lots of information. We're also going to give you solutions. Okay, Kiran also outlined that people are free to still apply to engage in regulated activity unless or until that barring decision is made. So if you had dismissed someone, like in the case that Kiran outlined, for satisfying the harm test, and you get a reference request from another employer, what are you going to do in those circumstances? We'll explore that in a little while. Let's first explore the rules regarding DBS information, because I'm mindful that one of the questions that we received in the chat box said about cautions or convictions remaining on the DBS certificate even after 15 years, I feel was the nature of the question. Well, interestingly, we do have a filtering system. This very complicated flowchart is the steps that the individual needs to go through to work out what they need to self-disclose to you as the employer when applying to an enhanced and barred list check. But also this outlines the certificate information that the DBS would be sharing with you. And the short version is youth cautions, reprimands and final warnings are no longer subject to self-disclosure by an applicant, even if they are for a safeguarding related offence. So if someone's under 18 and they receive a youth caution, a reprimand or final warning, it is no longer subject to self-disclosure and would not be automatically disclosed on the DBS certificate applied for you. If they have an adult caution, if it's a safeguarding caution, then it will be disclosed for life. Okay, won't come off after 15 years. It will be disclosed for life. If it's not on that list of safeguarding related offences, it will come off after 6 years automatically, and the applicant doesn't need to disclose it to you. Any custodial sentences, whether child or adult, will always be disclosed. And if someone's got a conviction, whether adult or child, if it's unspent, it will be disclosed. But But if it's spent, it will come off after not 15 years, but 11 years as an adult, or 5.5 years if the person was under 18. And if it's on that list, it's disclosed for life. Okay, so this slide here is just a snapshot of that list of specified offences. So I know there was a request for information about offences. The DBS list of specified offences, which I've included a link to at the bottom of this slide, highlights, I think there's over 1,000, 4,000 offences on it, of specifying offences. Not saying you cannot employ people who've been convicted of these offences. What it's saying is these offences will always be disclosed on DBS certificates and subject to self-disclosure based on the principles that I've just outlined. Now, you notice we talked a lot about theft and fraud. There's no theft or fraud offences on that list. So if somebody hasn't been to prison, whether child or adult, and they've been convicted of theft and fraud offences, those can come off after 11 years if over 18, or 5.5 years if under 18, even though financial abuse is relevant to you. I'm going to apply this formula now to our original applicant. I run it through the calculator under the old rules, which were in play to the 27th of November 2020, you would have got everything on that record. Under the new rules, in this particular case, you will receive nothing. So all of the offences in relation to our applicant Layla have been filtered because I've applied that filtering configuration, so none of them will be shared with you either through self-disclosure or on that list, okay? So Layla's DBS certificate, right, here are some other considerations relating to Layla, is very important. You know, if it's on the list, it's disclosed. If it's not, it comes off, okay? So what does this mean? All of this will be shared with you afterwards. What does this mean to you as the employer? What it means is there is less criminal record information being shared with you as a result of these changes, okay? So we have to rely more upon all of the information we gather within the recruitment exercise, including all of the information that Corinne mentioned earlier, qualification checks, having that vigilance, the right to work checks, the employment gaps, the employment history. Now more than ever, we are reliant on all the information that we gather when we're making those informed decisions. We have two toolkits to help you navigate that together with the one that Corinne shared earlier, effectively and confidently. So a big part of my role is to make sure that we have put those in your hands, okay? The first one, the Safe and Fair Recruitment Guide, a guide to carrying out effective pre-employment checks in social care. I think the clue's in the name, really. Yeah, the clue is in the name. It covers the whole brief, not just criminal record checks. It covers the information in relation to these DBS rules. It covers on how to assess and manage risk and relevance of not just criminal record information, but conduct information, safeguarding related conduct information where the person hasn't been cautioned or convicted, may have been subject to an allegation in work or outside of work. How do we deal with that information effectively? How to make a barring referral, how to deal with police intelligence if it was disclosed to you. These are all areas that are covered in that guide. So I would very well much encourage you to check out that guide because it's got a whole host of useful checklists. I know there was requests for checklists, templates on risk assessment and criminal record declaration so that we can gather information in line with our legal responsibilities, but also our safeguarding related responsibilities as well. This is one of the checklists in there on how to gather criminal record information effectively. So we call it the 9 steps of information gathering. I won't go through it in detail due to time, but it is there, and I will make sure that these are shared with you afterwards. But I do want to pick up the point at the end, because this is an area that has been of great bone of contention for quite some time now, and lots of confusion out there in the world. And I want to keep it very, very simple for you. In line with the current DBS handling certificate guidelines, you are allowed as a social care employer to keep the self-declaration information that I said to you is very important to obtain, a risk assessment that you have carried out, but you are also allowed under the current guidelines to retain a copy of the criminal record certificate, provided by the applicant for safeguarding audit purposes. And I imagine that the chat box could go pretty wild here now, with people asking queries or querying that stance and be, oh, CQC told me I cannot. I am aware of the discrepancy between advice from inspectors and that in the real world. So what I've done on this slide, if I've highlighted the case that led to this very fundamental change to the DBS guidelines, or one of the cases, this goes back to December 2017. I was involved in this case, okay, when it went in the public domain. But there are other cases on the right-hand side that all highlight the absolute importance of being able to have a verification on the information that you went on when you made that decision to hire somebody initially. You do need that. If anything goes wrong and you end up in a court of law, you need to be able to demonstrate the decision making that you made at the time of that person's employment. Okay, happy to answer any questions on that. I'm sure there will be some, but we will share those slides afterwards. We have developed a model. We have developed a model called the PRISM model of safer employment. And that model is covered both in the guides, Safe and Fair Recruitment, but also the guide Sharing Effective References and Conduct Information. And I again thank DBS and I again thank Corinne for all of that collaborative working that was involved in putting together not just this toolkit, but this framework that spans across the other better hiring toolkits as well. And I will be talking more about the safe employment model at this year's Care Show. So if you don't feel that you're getting enough from my 20 odd minutes today, then I do urge you, is that enough, but Dudley? I do urge you to come to the Care Show London and listen to more information on the PRISM model of safer employment, which I will expand in greater detail, because I cannot in 20 minutes, okay? But the short version is, it goes beyond recruitment, okay, and applies the whole employment relationship. The PRISM model recognizes that we are getting less information through current recruitment exercises, but it helps us to apply what we call a safeguarding mindset across the whole employment relationship, because we know taking that compliance approach in itself is not keeping people safe. So what we also need to do is embed professional curiosity. It's not just about doing checks, it's about applying professional curiosity. Corinne was saying, she's educated you today about the use of AI and how she could have faked references. Okay, so now you know, and you'll probably second guess many references that you'll be getting going forward, because you know that they're easy to fake, their qualifications are easy to fake. So that is very important. You've now got curiosity when you're looking at references, whereas before you just go, I got my dates only reference, no problem, I'm good to go. My job, Corinne's job today is also to help you with developing professional curiosity. The PRISM model does that. I'm going a couple of minutes over. Is that all right, Dudley?
Go ahead.
Is it a hard stop? Right. So the first thing that I want us to do is destroy the myth. Okay, because the myth that was said earlier is we can't share negative references. That is a myth. If you ask the ICO, they'll tell you it's a myth. Right. Data protection has never been, okay, a barrier to sharing relevant, safeguarding negative information, and high profile cases have demonstrated that you know, that is a misconception. It's about sharing data responsibly and making that appropriate decision in a case-by-case approach. So I saw one earlier going, could I share a DBS barring referral because the person was late? Well, the answer to that is going to be quite an easy no, unless that lateness involves something relating to safeguarding related conduct. So you have to apply a considered approach to responsible data sharing. GDPR is not a barrier. We do cover it in the guide. Criminal offence data, which includes criminal conduct, so not just whether someone's got a caution or conviction, but whether someone's been subject to an allegation, has its own category now under UK GDPR. So what we used to talk about is personal sensitive data under the Data Protection Act 1998. Now we are talking about criminal offence data under Article 10 of UK GDPR. And you'll find that there's a lot of things that you're probably not sharing that you are allowed to. So I'm doing a pitch here for Corinne's guide again, the Better Hiring Toolkit for Care. Check out the data protection FAQs. So if there's nothing else that you do, check out the data protection FAQs. Obviously, we want you to look at the whole guide, but check out the data protection FAQs because they will answer some of these questions that, you know, you might have myths about. I just want to quickly come on to a couple of points about references. Let's look at Layla's reference because it is dates only. Okay, so Layla's got a dates only reference. Okay, we go through it and said, well, is that sufficient for CQC requirements? Why are we asking about safeguard information but not being prepared to share safeguarding related information? That's a question I would pose to you, because I know people say, well, we're not allowed to share. Well, are you allowed to ask? Because I think you'll find that you're going, oh yeah, I'm allowed to ask, right? So why am I not allowed to share? You are allowed to share factual information, even if it is negative, okay? And in this case, unbeknownst to our employer, the individual had been subject of safeguarding concerns, which did lead to a referral to the DBS in exactly the same scenario as what Kiran outlined. So they've done a referral to the DBS, but it will take time for that referral to be satisfied. And in that time, our applicant has been able to apply to engage in regulated activity. So she's been referred, but guess what? They just haven't told you on the reference that you received. They've provided you with a dates only reference. I'm going to finish off here now with a couple of points that I want to make about references. If you are carrying out references, you could be failing in your duty of care and your safeguarding responsibilities if you fail to provide a detailed, effective reference, okay? You also have a duty to make sure that any reference that you provide is accurate, even if it's negative, dependable, and does not contain any material misstatement or any omission. So if you knew that you had information that someone presented a risk and you did a barring referral and you gave it dates only, that could constitute an act of omission. Please do not expect the state to do your job for you. You know, when you have made decisions to dismiss someone, it won't automatically appear on a DBS certificate just because you've done a referral. If you have any concerns, make sure that you outline them. And there's one super tip that I'm going to give you and finish off with. The confidential reference exemption. If you supply a reference in confidence or request for it to be treated confidentially, under UK GDPR, both the organisation sharing the reference and the organisation receiving the reference are entitled to not share a copy of that reference with the applicant, okay? So that should be the ultimate empowerment to you to share relevant information. There is an exemption that has existed in UK GDPR, since it went live, that can protect you to share that information and not just simply do a dates only reference. Okay. Okay. So these are a real key leveler. The guidance that Corinne and I work together to produce has reference templates in it. It's built in that confidential exemption. So use all of these tools, right, to help you make those decisions. Use the Skills for Care pages on Safer Employment. We'll send out all the links, and I'm throwing a lot of information at you, right? But if you've got any questions, you can also come back to me. Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Dominic.
Sorry, I went over. Sorry, I went over.
No. That's fantastic. Very quickly, please. I mean, you've got the information there. I'm sure people are going to know and be curious about how the training can be done, and I'm sure you will let them know so you can get in touch with him. And if worse comes to worse, if you can't get hold of him up to that time, he will be at the Care Show at the end of.
Be at the Care Show, London.
And you can see him where he'll be doing another hour session, and you can probably ask him further questions from there. I know we're sort of short for time. Very quickly, I do a lot of work around inclusion and talk about discrimination. One of the things would be if someone applies for a job role and, for example, they then declare their history and information about maybe their past criminal records, but it doesn't come up on when you do a DBS check, and then subsequently you tell them they haven't got the job because of that. There is a case now, people say they were discriminated against, and as a result, because it didn't come up on their DBS check, they should be fine to go and work, and people have been refused from employment because of that. So that becomes that area where people say, well, my record is clear, I should still be employed.
It's a very brilliant question, and the short version is, it's not what we don't want as the employer is people sharing data with us that we can't unring the bell from. All right. But even when I looked at the case of Layla, it's a very complicated system, which is very individual to that person. So they need to make sure before they're answering questions about their criminal record that they are getting appropriate advice and guidance about what they must self-disclose. And the toolkits that I've shared with you have not just built in the right questions we should be asking, but signposting those applicants to say, before you answer this question, right, go and get advice, because, you know, we want to make sure you get it wrong. In regards to your answer about the employer's action, the problem is if they've self-disclosed and it hasn't come back on that DBS certificate because of being in England and Wales, because remember, they could self-disclose and they're from overseas, right? And it's not going to come back on the certificate. If it's a UK applicant or they've lived in the UK, then quite simply, you would be breaking the law and you would be legally discriminating against that person if you took into account a caution or conviction that had been determined to be filtered. So it would be a form of discrimination for which they could face consequences.
Thank you. I mean, Peter, I'm not sure if you want to add something to this, or we haven't got long. If there's anyone who wants any pressing questions, you can raise your hand up very quickly or put something in the chat. Other than that, I will leave it to Peter.
I don't think so, Dudley. All I would like to say is again to thank the presenters. There's a huge amount of information there. And for those of you attending, do remember to log this against your CPD files, which is something else that our friends from CQC will be asking you about. If you have questions that continue about this, then come back to Dudley and myself. We can forward them, or you've got the contact details. It's very easy for us to say that there's a huge amount of information there. Do use it. It's finding the time sometimes in SMEs to actually do that. But I have to tell you that the changes that are coming along to HR rules under this government, you think the employer's national insurance contribution change is going to give you a problem. That's nothing compared to what the HR rule changes are going to cause you. And as CQC will tell you, you need to be as good at business as you are at care. And making sure that you look after your clients, your service users correctly involves making sure the business processes are correct and checked up on regularly. And we come across time and again with sponsored recruits, people using false and the wrong way of not employing them. Basically, without sponsored recruits, the National Health Service and social care wouldn't work anyway. So embrace these folks. They're doing a really good job for you. And on that happy note, I'd just like to say again, thank you and goodbye to all.
Oh, thank you, Pete. Before you go, Peter, just we will be sharing the slides on the website as well. So do check that. And the other point is that a lot of people probably coming here who deal with international recruits use some of these toolkits to actually help you when you actually, the curiosity one about individuals when they're coming to the country. You can ask them questions about the history as well. So probably use some of these templates to help you when assessing those from overseas as well. So other than that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and we will see you